All right, folks, time for another Bearded Wonder Explains. This time we're looking at the Western Theater. So, just as a quick review, the Western Theater, the goals of the Western Theater are to kind of get control of the Ohio River, that's the green arrow there, with the get control of the lower Mississippi River, that's the orange arrow, and then to cut the deep south off from Virginia, that's kind of that light kind of peach color. So that's the goal that the Union has. And remember, the Union is the one that is fighting the offensive war. The Confederacy can kind of sit back and just kind of hope that the Union quits. So the specific way that the Confederacy is going to do that is to try to stop the Union from controlling the border. So if you look kind of at these green and orange arrows here, the goal of the Confederacy is to stop them from getting control of those things. If they do, then they cut the Confederacy in half by controlling that river, which Mississippi River is a mile wide in a lot of places. So if you control the river, you really kind of control the connection point of these different states. But it also protects the northern border there and eventually kind of stops pressure from the Confederacy going on Kentucky and Missouri to turn into slave states. So the first battle that we want to talk about is Shiloh. Shiloh is right there in kind of western middle Tennessee. And basically, the goal of the Union being there is to prevent Kentucky or Missouri from entering the war. You can see how close it is to those yellow, those border states, those kind of in-between states. And the Confederacy is trying to block the control of the Ohio River. So on the right-hand side of that green arrow there, you see kind of where that black squiggly line, it's a border of a state, but it's also a river, kind of flows into the black squiggly line that goes up and down, or north and south. That would be your Mississippi River. And so they don't want them to control that. So Shiloh is our battlefield here. And basically, what is important about Shiloh, first off, you can see it's April 1862. The Western Theater goes very differently from the Eastern Theater for the Union. And a lot of that has to do with this man right here. His name is Ulysses S. Grant. He is in charge of the army, of the Western kind of army. And he recognizes very quickly that the Union has more men and more factories to make more equipment and railroads to move those troops and that equipment more effectively. And so he kind of recognizes that all the North has to do is use those resources effectively. Now, one note about Ulysses S. Grant. If you like winning, then he's a great guy. If you like living, he might not be the guy that you're super excited is leading your army. Basically, he created bloodbaths on purpose because he recognized that the Union could afford to trade soldiers and the Confederacy couldn't. So if every Union soldier killed one Confederate soldier, then the Confederacy would run out of soldiers a lot faster. And Grant kind of recognized that, but his battles tended to be very bloody, and Shiloh is not an exception to that. But the Confederates retreat, and so that green arrow there, we get a check mark. So the next goal is to get Vicksburg. It's a city on the Mississippi River, kind of halfway up there in Mississippi. And you can see that basically the goal here for the Union is to break it off. And they had been coming up from New Orleans and down from Shiloh, and they surround Vicksburg. Now, if you look at the picture of Vicksburg, you can see it is way up on a hill. Grant learned his lesson from his friend Mr. Burnside, or General Burnside, and he kind of recognized it's a bad idea to try to run up a hill and attack a fort. And so his solution to that was to just surround the fort and let the people starve. And so that was the goal. And so the Confederates basically said that they were going to wait as long as they could, and decided to hold out. And so the siege lasts for 47 days. Soldiers in Vicksburg are getting pretty desperate, eating horses, other things like that. Unfortunately, maybe not eating humans, but it's getting about that bad. And so finally, Vicksburg surrenders. And so that's a check mark as well. Now, this gets Ulysses S. Grant a promotion. You can see July 1863. We'll talk about Gettysburg. Even though it's a Union victory, Abraham Lincoln is very unhappy with how George Meade, who would be the new commander, kind of handles things. And so he promotes Grant. And so Grant's going to leave, and that kind of leaves this guy, William T. Tecumseh Sherman, in charge for what we call today Sherman's March to the Sea. So after Vicksburg, about a year later, he goes to Atlanta, surrounds the city, puts it under siege, and basically takes over Atlanta. William Sherman's kind of motto, if you will, it's a direct quote. He said, "War is hell." And basically he believed that you should do whatever you needed to in order to win. And basically, in his mind, the way that meant is that every farm that he burns is a hungry Confederate soldier, and every hungry Confederate soldier can't fight as well. And if they can't fight as well, the war will end sooner. And so he kind of conducted what we might consider today to be warfare on the civilian population, burning farms of people that maybe were supporting the Confederates, maybe not, but definitely were not combatants, and that was his strategy, and it worked. So the march to the sea is specifically from Atlanta right there to where you see the arrow pointing, that's Savannah, Georgia, burning his way the entire way. By the way, he spread his troops out to burn more land, and so about 60 miles wide is what he managed to kind of destroy. Not necessarily for 100 years in the South, William Sherman's name is not one that you say when you're trying to make people feel good. But eventually he gets to Savannah. He actually gives Savannah as a birthday or a Christmas present to the president. Savannah is not burned by Sherman the way that other towns are, like Atlanta. If you go to Savannah's historic district today, you will see that they have some old historic buildings that are from before the Civil War, and that would not have happened if Sherman had not been feeling like giving the president a nice Christmas present. But he does, and so now we have that third kind of objective to cut off the Deep South from Virginia as well. So the Western campaign actually works very well. Sherman stops marching to the sea, starts marching north through Columbia and through South Carolina there, again, kind of burning whatever he comes across. Charleston kind of hanging out there all by itself. They still control Fort Sumter right there in the middle of Charleston Harbor, which means the Confederates never actually fully get control of Charleston. They kind of move down, siege the city, but unlike Vicksburg that can't get supplies because they have to be on the river and the Union controls the north and the south of the river, Fort Sumter keeps that harbor open, and so Charleston's able to resupply itself. They kind of come here to the island and shell the fort. The fort takes an absolute pounding. It was 3 stories high at one point. Today, if you went to see it, only 1 story remains. But the fort does not surrender, and neither does the city. But Sherman doesn't need to. He just says, fine, you know what, you want this town, that's fine. I'm going to make sure that you don't have anything to trade in your nice little fancy town by burning the rest of it. So that's kind of the way that goes. And so if we look at that, then okay, this is getting a little bit out of control, but basically the Western Theater, if you want to kind of look at it two kind of stages. So we have Grant's kind of attacks in the beginning that are very successful, splits the Confederacy in half, and then they cut the half in half again, and burn a lot of the area. So by 1865, you have a lot of Southern people that no longer support the war effort. Because it's all been burned, so what are you going to support them with? But B, they're just kind of like, this isn't what you signed up for, right? At this point, your home, your town, everything's destroyed. But it also kind of creates a lasting memory of the Civil War that's kind of bitter to a lot of Southerners. And so, not going to say it's good propaganda. It might be good war strategy, but it definitely doesn't win people over to seeing the world the way that you do. But that's basically the Western theater, moving to the East or the Southern theater maybe, and the March to the Sea.